The lone whistle of the train echoed across the barren landscape as it pulled away from Humboldt Station, Montana Territory, leaving behind nothing but swirling dust and a solitary woman standing on the wooden platform. Dahlia Gibson clutched her carpetbag with white-knuckled fingers, her eyes scanning the empty station with growing dread. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Someone should have been waiting for her, the man she had agreed to marry after months of correspondence. The man who had promised her a new life far from the overcrowded streets of Boston. The year was 1883, and at 22, Dahlia had made the boldest decision of her life, traveling over 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. Now, as the afternoon sun beat down on her pale skin, that decision seemed more foolish than brave. "Hello," she called out, her voice small against the vastness of the Montana prairie. The station was little more than a wooden shack with a platform, not the bustling town she had imagined from Mr. Edmund Cormier's letters. No answer came. Dahlia set her bag down and pulled a letter from her reticule, reading it once again, though she knew the words by heart. "I will meet you at Humboldt Station on the 15th of May. Look for a tall man with a red beard." She checked the date on the station's posted schedule. May 15th, 1883. She was in the right place at the right time, but Edmund Cormier was not. The wind picked up, catching her bonnet and nearly pulling it from her head. She secured it with trembling hands, fighting back tears. She had no money for a return ticket, having spent everything she had to come west. Her parents were dead, her job at the textile mill gone, and her tiny rented room in Boston now occupied by someone else. There was nothing to go back to. A cloud of dust appeared in the distance, growing larger as it approached the station. Dahlia squinted against the sun, making out the shape of a rider coming fast. Her heart quickened. Perhaps it was Mr. Cormier, delayed but hastening to meet her. The horse and rider slowed as they neared, and Dahlia saw it was not her intended. This man was younger, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled from beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were trail-worn but neat: a faded blue shirt, leather vest, and denim pants tucked into well-used boots. His eyes, startlingly blue against his tanned face, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He dismounted in one fluid motion, leading his horse toward her. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat, "you look a mite lost." "I'm waiting for someone," Dahlia replied, lifting her chin despite her growing uncertainty. "Mr. Edmund Cormier. Do you know him by chance?" The man's expression changed, a shadow crossing his features. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark, wavy hair. "Miss, I'm afraid I have some bad news. Edmund Cormier passed away 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him quick." The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Dead," she whispered, "but his letters. I was to be his bride." The man nodded solemnly. The whole town knew he was expecting a mail-order bride. "I'm mighty sorry no one sent word, but things move slow out here. I only heard about the train arrival this morning and rode straight here." Dahlia's legs weakened, and she sank onto her carpetbag. Her future, the one she had pinned all her hopes on, had vanished. "What am I to do now?" she asked, more to herself than to the stranger. The cowboy crouched before her, bringing himself to eye level. "My name is Zachariah Jones," he said softly. "Folks call me Zach. I run the Double J Ranch about 10 miles from town. I knew Edmund. He was a good man." "Dahlia Gibson," she replied automatically, extending her hand as she had been taught, though the social graces of Boston seemed absurdly out of place here. He took her hand gently, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Miss Gibson, I can't leave you here alone. Humboldt isn't much more than a few buildings. The nearest hotel is in Sweetwater, 20 miles east. I have nowhere to go, she admitted, hating the tremble in her voice. Zachariah looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a decisiveness that startled her, he stood and offered his hand again. "Miss Gibson, I believe you were meant for me." Dahlia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon." "Not like that," he quickly amended, a flush rising beneath his tan. "What I mean is, I need help at my ranch. I've been looking to hire someone to cook and keep house. It would be a respectable position with fair pay, and you'd have your own cabin on the property. At least until you decide what you want to do." Relief and wariness warred within her. "You're offering me employment, a stranger." "Edmund wouldn't have chosen a bride who wasn't hard-working and honorable," Zachariah said simply. "And truth be told, I'm desperate. Been eating my own cooking for too long." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. "Is it that terrible? Worse," he admitted with a rueful smile. "I burn water." Dahlia weighed her options, though in truth she had none. Return to Boston with no money and no prospects, or accept this unexpected offer from a man whose eyes held nothing but kindness. "I accept, Mr. Jones," she said finally. "Though I should warn you, I've never cooked for a ranch before." "Can't be worse than what I do to food," he said, picking up her carpet-bag with ease. "And it's Zach, please. Mr. Jones was my father." He helped her onto his horse, placing her bag securely before mounting behind her. Dahlia stiffened at the impropriety of their position, but as the horse began to move, she found herself leaning back slightly against his solid chest. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "It's a fair ride to the Double J." As they rode away from the empty platform, Dahlia found herself wondering if perhaps fate had brought her to Montana after all, just not in the way she had expected. The journey to the Double J Ranch was unlike anything Dahlia had ever experienced. The vastness of the Montana prairie stretched in all directions, making her feel small and insignificant. Yet there was beauty in its wildness, carpets of spring wildflowers, the distant purple shadows of mountains, and a sky so wide and blue it seemed to go on forever. "It's breathtaking," she said, unable to contain her wonder. "That it is," Zach agreed, his voice close behind her. "First time I saw this country, I knew I'd never leave." "Where are you from originally?" she asked, grateful for the conversation to distract from their proximity. "Tennessee. My pa fought for the Confederacy and didn't much care for how things changed after the war. Brought the family west in '68 when I was 13. He and my ma are gone now, but they left me the ranch." "I'm sorry for your loss," Dahlia said softly. "Been a few years now. What about you?" "What brings a Boston lady all the way to Montana territory to marry a man she's never met?" Dahlia hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Necessity. My parents died of influenza 2 years ago. I had been working at Lowell Mills since I was 16, but the conditions, they weren't good. When I became ill myself, I lost my position. I answered Mr. Cormier's advertisement in the Matrimonial Times because I had nowhere else to turn." Zach was quiet for a moment. "That took courage, or desperation," she countered. "Sometimes they're the same thing." They crested a hill, and Dahlia caught her first glimpse of the Double J. It wasn't grand by any means, a modest 2-story house with a wide porch, a barn, several outbuildings, and a smaller cabin a short distance away. But it was neat and well maintained, with corrals holding horses and cattle grazing in the distance. "Home sweet home," Zach said, guiding his horse down the slope. "It's not much compared to Boston, but it's mine." "It's lovely," Dahlia said, and meant it. After the crowded tenements of Boston, the openness and peace were intoxicating. As they approached, a dog came bounding from the porch, a large, shaggy animal with one ear standing up and one flopping down. It barked joyfully, circling the horse as they came to a stop. "That's Ranger," Zach said, dismounting and reaching up to help Dahlia down. "He's harmless, just overly friendly." Dahlia slid from the horse into Zach's waiting arms, her hands instinctively gripping his shoulders for balance. For a moment they stood too close, his hands at her waist, her face tilted up to his. Something flickered in his eyes before he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Let me show you to your cabin," he said, retrieving her bag. The cabin was simple but clean, one room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, a chest of drawers, and a small iron stove. A colorful quilt brightened the bed, and curtains framed the single window. "My mother made those," Zach said, noticing her looking at the curtains. "Said every home needed something pretty." She was right, Dahlia agreed, touched by this glimpse of the man's past. "The pump is just outside for water, and there's an outhouse behind. The main house has a proper bath that you're welcome to use." "I thought you might want your own space rather than a room in the house. Seemed more appropriate." Dahlia nodded, grateful for his consideration. "Thank you, Mr. Joe Zach. This is more than I expected." "Well, get settled in. I'll come fetch you for supper in about an hour. You must be hungry after your journey." Left alone, Dahlia sank onto the bed, the events of the day finally catching up with her. She had come to Montana to be a bride and had instead become a housekeeper. It wasn't the future she had imagined, but at least she had a roof over her head and honest work. And her employer seemed to be a good man, not that she had much experience with men to compare. She unpacked her meager belongings, 2 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, a nightgown, a brush, and a small framed photograph of her parents on their wedding day. The last item she placed carefully on the chest of drawers, a reminder of what love looked like. True to his word, Zach knocked on her door an hour later. He had changed his shirt and combed his hair, she noticed, though it still curled rebelliously at the collar. He led her to the main house, a comfortable if spartanly furnished home with sturdy wooden furniture and few decorative touches. "I'm afraid my bachelor status shows," he said, gesturing around the sitting room. "My mother would be mortified. It's very practical," Dahlia said diplomatically, making him laugh. "That's a kind way of putting it." He showed her to the kitchen, where a pot of something bubbled on the stove. "I warned you about my cooking. It's just beans and salt pork. Tomorrow the kitchen is yours if you're willing." "I'll do my best," Dahlia promised, wondering how different cooking on a ranch would be from the simple meals she had prepared in her tiny Boston apartment. They ate at the kitchen table, the conversation stilted at first but gradually easing as Zach told her about the ranch and the surrounding area. Humboldt was barely a town, just a general store, a blacksmith, a small church, and the train station. Sweetwater, 20 miles east, was more substantial, with a proper hotel, several shops, and even a small theater. "I go into Sweetwater once a month for supplies," Zach explained. "You can make a list of whatever you need for the house." "How many people will I be cooking for?" Dahlia asked, practical concerns overcoming her initial shyness. "Just me most days. I have 2 ranch hands brothers, Ali and Tom Matthews, but they have their own cabin and cook for themselves, except on Sundays when they usually join me for dinner. And sometimes my foreman, Jacob Miller, eats here. He has a place in town with his wife." "That sounds manageable," Dahlia said, relief evident in her voice. "I was afraid you might have a dozen hungry cowboys to feed." Zach smiled. "The Double J isn't that big. Just about 800 head of cattle, some horses, and a few chickens that are ornery as the devil." After supper, they sat on the porch as twilight fell, watching as the sky turned from blue to pink to deep purple. Stars appeared, more than Dahlia had ever seen in her life, uncountable diamonds scattered across the velvet darkness. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It is," Zach agreed, but when she turned, she found him looking at her rather than the sky. He quickly averted his gaze, embarrassed at being caught. "I should let you rest. You've had a long day." He walked her back to her cabin, Ranger trotting alongside them. At her door, Zach hesitated. "Miss Gibson, Dahlia, please," she interrupted. "If I'm to call you Zach, you should use my given name." "Dahlia," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her heart flutter. "I want you to know that you're safe here. I know this isn't what you planned, coming out west to marry one man and ending up working for another. But I give you my word as a gentleman, I'll treat you with nothing but respect." His earnestness touched her deeply. "Thank you, Zach. I believe you," he nodded, satisfied. "Good night, then. If you need anything, I'm just up at the house." Dahlia watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the starlit sky. Despite the strangeness of her situation, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. Perhaps, just perhaps, this unexpected turn of events was not a disaster after all. That night, she slept more soundly than she had in years. Morning came early on the Double J, with the first pale light of dawn seeping through Dahlia's curtains. She dressed quickly in her plainest dress, a serviceable brown cotton, and pinned her hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. The air was crisp but promised warmth as the sun rose higher. When she reached the main house, she found Zach already at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and studying a leather-bound ledger. He looked up as she entered, a smile warming his features. "Good morning. Coffee's hot if you want some." "Thank you," she said, pouring herself a cup from the pot on the stove. It was strong enough to strip paint, and she tried not to grimace as she sipped it. "Too strong?" he asked, noticing her expression. "No, it's invigorating," she managed, making him laugh. "I warned you about my kitchen skills. Feel free to make it however you like from now on." Dahlia explored the pantry and found it reasonably well stocked with staples: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, rice, and canned goods. The cold box held bacon, eggs, and butter. Outside, she discovered a small kitchen garden that had seen better days but still produced some hardy herbs and vegetables. "This could use some attention," she mentioned when Zach came to find her. "Another of my failings," he admitted. "My mother kept it beautiful, but I've got no talent for growing things unless they have 4 legs and eat grass." Dahlia laughed at that, surprising herself. "I'll see what I can do with it. We had a small garden behind our house in Boston when I was young." She made a simple breakfast of fried eggs, bacon, and biscuits, pleased when Zach ate with obvious enjoyment. "This is the best meal I've had in months," he declared, helping himself to a second biscuit. "If this impresses you, your standards truly have fallen," she teased, growing more comfortable in his presence. "You should have tasted what I made yesterday. Even Ranger wouldn't eat it." After breakfast, Zach showed her around the property. The barn housed several horses, including his own mount, a handsome chestnut gelding named Buck. The chicken coop held a dozen hens and one imperious rooster who eyed Dahlia with suspicion. "That's Napoleon," Zach said, pointing to the rooster. "He thinks he's emperor of the yard." "He looks rather formidable," Dahlia observed, keeping a safe distance. "He's a terror. Nearly took my finger off last week, but the hens lay well, so we tolerate his megalomania." They were returning from the corrals when 2 men rode up, both with the weathered faces and sturdy builds of men who worked outdoors. They dismounted, eyeing Dahlia curiously. "Illy, Tom, this is Miss Dahlia Gibson," Zach introduced. "She'll be keeping house for me." "Miss Gibson, the Matthews brothers, my most reliable hands." The men tipped their hats politely, though Dahlia didn't miss the look that passed between them. Clearly, the arrival of a young woman at the bachelor-run ranch was cause for speculation. "Pleasure to meet you, madam," said the older of the two, who Dahlia guessed to be in his 30s. "I'm Emily, and this here's my brother Tom." "Likewise," Dahlia replied with a nod. "Miss Gibson was to be Edmund Cormier's bride," Zach explained, his tone discouraging any improper thoughts. "I've hired her to cook and keep house until she decides her next steps." Understanding dawned on the brothers' faces. "Right sorry to hear about Edmund, miss," Tom said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "He was a good sort." "Thank you," Dahlia said, touched by their concern for a man she had never met. After the men rode off to check the north pasture, Zach turned to her. "I hope you don't mind my explanation. It seemed best to be straightforward about your situation." "Of course," Dahlia agreed. "I appreciate your honesty. I should warn you, news travels fast out here. By sundown, everyone in Humboldt will know there's a young woman staying at the Double J." "Will that cause problems?" she asked, suddenly anxious. Zach shook his head. "Not problems exactly, but you might find yourself the object of some curiosity. We don't get many new faces around here, especially not unmarried women," she finished for him. "Exactly. But don't worry. Anyone gives you trouble, they answer to me." Something about his protective stance made Dahlia's heart skip, but she quickly reminded herself not to read too much into it. Zachariah Jones was simply being a gentleman, nothing more. The next week fell into a comfortable routine. Dahlia rose early, prepared breakfast, then spent her days cleaning the main house, which hadn't seen a woman's touch in years. She attacked the dust and disorder methodically, one room at a time. Zach worked from dawn till dusk with his men, moving cattle, mending fences, and dealing with the 1,000 tasks a ranch required. In the evenings, they would eat together, their conversations growing easier as they learned more about each other. Zach told stories of growing up in the West, of cattle drives and the characters he'd met along the way. Dahlia shared tales of Boston, describing the crowded streets and tall buildings with a vividness that made him feel he'd been there. On Sunday, as promised, the Matthews brothers joined them for dinner. Dahlia had spent the morning preparing a roast with vegetables from the garden she had begun to revive, and fresh bread that filled the house with its homey aroma. "Miss Gibson, this is the finest meal I've had since leaving my mama's table in Missouri," Eli declared, helping himself to seconds. "Here, here," Tom agreed, his mouth half full. "Zach, you struck gold when Miss Gibson stepped off that train." Dahlia blushed at the praise, but couldn't help noticing the way Zach's eyes lingered on her face, a small smile playing at his lips. "I know it," he said simply. After dinner, while Dahlia cleared the dishes, she overheard Tom speaking to Zach on the porch, his voice carrying through the open window. "She's a fine woman, Zach. Proper and pretty, too. You thinking about making her more than just your housekeeper?" "That's not why I hired her," Zach replied, his voice firm. "She came west to marry another man and found herself stranded. I'm just helping her get on her feet. Still, can't blame a man for noticing. If you don't speak up, someone else will." Words already spreading about the Boston lady at the Double J. Dahlia moved away from the window, her cheeks burning. It hadn't occurred to her that her presence might put Zach in an awkward position. Though the thought of other men expressing interest in her was strangely unsettling, especially when she found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet, steady rancher who had taken her in. The next morning, Dahlia was hanging laundry on the line when a wagon approached the ranch. A woman about her own age sat at the reins, her blonde hair neatly pinned beneath a straw hat. She pulled the wagon to a stop and waved. "Hello there, you must be Miss Gibson." Dahlia set down her laundry basket and walked over. "Yes, I am, and you are." Sarah Miller. My husband Jacob is Zach's foreman. The woman climbed down from the wagon with practiced ease. I thought it was high time I came to meet you, being the only other woman around these parts, more or less. Dahlia smiled, genuinely pleased to have female company. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Miller. Sarah, please. I brought you some preserves, peach and blackberry, made them last fall. She handed over 2 jars tied with gingham cloth. How kind of you. Would you like some coffee? It's fresh, and I baked bread this morning. The 2 women sat at the kitchen table, and Sarah wasted no time getting to the heart of things. So, you came to marry Edmund Cormier and found yourself working for Zachariah Jones instead. Quite a turn of events. News does travel fast, Dahlia observed, pouring coffee. Like wildfire, Sarah confirmed with a grin. Nothing happens in Humboldt that isn't known by everyone before sundown. But don't worry, Edmund was well respected, and Zach is the most honorable man in the county. No one's thinking anything improper. I'm grateful for that, Dahlia said. Zach has been a gentleman. Sarah studied her over the rim of her cup. He's a good man, lost his wife about 5 years back. Dahlia nearly spilled her coffee. His wife, he never mentioned being married. It's not something he talks about much. Jenny was her name. Died in childbirth along with the baby. Zach took it hard, threw himself into the ranch and hasn't looked up much since. How terrible, Dahlia murmured, her heart aching for the pain he must have endured. It was. For a while folks worried about him. He got so thin and worked himself to exhaustion, but he's stronger now. Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. The reason I'm telling you this is so you understand why he might seem reserved. It's not lack of interest, if you take my meaning. Dahlia felt heat rise to her face. Mrs. Miller. Sarah, I think you misunderstand. I'm simply Zach's housekeeper. Sarah's knowing smile suggested she wasn't convinced. If you say so. But I've known Zach Jones for 7 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The conversation left Dahlia unsettled long after Sarah departed. She had been attracted to Zach from their first meeting, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. But the knowledge of his past loss added a depth to her understanding of him that made her feelings even more complicated. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Dahlia found the courage to speak of it. Sarah Miller visited today, she began, keeping her eyes on the distant mountains. Did she? Sarah's good people. Her husband's the best foreman a man could ask for. She told me about your wife, Dahlia said softly. I'm so sorry, Zach. He went very still beside her, and for a moment she feared she had overstepped. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. Sarah shouldn't have told you that. Perhaps not, but I'm glad to know. It helps me understand you better. Zach sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Jenny and I were married for less than 2 years. She was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. We'd known each other since we were kids. He paused, swallowing hard. The doctor said the baby was too big, that Jenny was too small. There was nothing anyone could do. It wasn't your fault, Dahlia said gently, placing her hand on his arm. My head knows that. My heart's been slower to accept it. He looked at her then, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. I don't talk about it because for a long time it was all I could think about. Now, it's just a part of who I am, a sad part, but not the whole story anymore. Thank you for telling me, Dahlia said, moved by his honesty. He covered her hand with his own just for a moment before standing. It's getting late. I've got to be up before dawn tomorrow. We're moving the herd to the summer pasture. As he walked away, Dahlia remained on the porch, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. Her feelings for Zachariah Jones were growing stronger each day, but she wondered if his heart had room for anyone new. The cattle drive to the summer pasture kept Zach away from the ranch for 3 days. Dahlia used the time to deep clean the house, attack the garden with renewed vigor, and even make curtains for the sitting room from fabric she found in a trunk in the attic. She worked from dawn till dusk, partly to be useful, but also to keep her mind from dwelling too much on the absent rancher. On the 3rd evening, she was startled by a knock at her cabin door. Her heart leapt, thinking Zach had returned, but when she opened it, she found a stranger, a man in his 40s with a prosperous look about him, dressed in a suit despite the dusty roads. "Miss Gibson?" he inquired, hat in hand. "I'm Howard Thornton, mayor of Sweetwater and owner of the Sweetwater Mercantile." "Good evening, Mr. Thornton," she replied cautiously, keeping the door partially closed. "What brings you all the way out here? News of your situation has reached our town. I understand you came west to marry Edmund Cormier and have been working for Mr. Jones since learning of Edmund's passing." "That's correct," Dahlia confirmed, wondering where this was leading. "I've come to offer you a position," Thornton said, smiling broadly. "My store needs a clerk, someone with education and refinement to help the ladies select fabrics and such. The position pays well and includes a room above the store. Sweetwater is a growing town with many opportunities for a young woman of quality." Dahlia was momentarily speechless. The offer was unexpected but not unwelcome. Working in a store would be easier than ranch work, and living in town would offer more society than the isolated Double J. "That's very kind, Mr. Thornton," she said carefully. "May I consider your offer and let you know my decision?" "Of course," he replied, though his smile dimmed slightly. "I'm staying overnight in Humboldt and returning to Sweetwater tomorrow afternoon. Perhaps you could send word by then." He handed her a card with his information. After he left, Dahlia sat on her bed, turning the card over in her hands. It was a generous offer from a man who seemed respectable. Yet the thought of leaving the Double J, of leaving Zach, filled her with an unexpected sadness. She was still contemplating her options the next morning when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw Zach and his men returning, dusty and tired from their days on the range. Without thinking, she hurried outside, relief washing over her at the sight of him safely returned. Zach dismounted when he saw her, handing Buck's reins to Ellie and striding toward her with a smile that made her heart skip. "You're a welcome sight, Dahlia Gibson," he said, stopping before her. "As are you," she replied, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "Was the drive successful?" "Without a hitch. The cattle are happily grazing in grass up to their bellies." He looked past her to the house. "Something's different, new curtains," she explained. "I hope you don't mind. I found the fabric in the attic." "Mind, not at all, it looks." He searched for the word, homie. There was something in the way he said it that gave Dahlia courage. "Zach, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, Howard Thornton came to see me. He offered me a position at his store in Sweetwater." Zach's expression shuddered, his earlier warmth replaced by careful neutrality. "That's a good opportunity. Thornton's store is the finest in 3 counties. "Yes, it seems so," she agreed, watching his face carefully. "When would you start?" "I haven't accepted yet. I told him I needed to think about it." Zach nodded, his eyes not quite meeting hers. "You should take it, Dahlia. It's a better situation for a lady like yourself, more civilized." His words stung more than she expected. "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" "What I want doesn't signify," he said stiffly. "I promised to help you get on your feet, and it appears you have options now, better options than being a rancher's housekeeper." "I see," Dahlia said, disappointment washing over her. "Well, thank you for your advice, Mr. Jones. I'll consider it carefully." She turned and walked back to her cabin, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She had hoped foolishly. It seemed that he might ask her to stay, that he might have begun to care for her as she had for him. Dahlia spent the afternoon packing her few belongings, her decision made. If Zach could so easily encourage her to take another position, then clearly her feelings were one-sided. She would send word to Mr. Thornton accepting his offer and leave for Sweetwater the next day. She was folding her second dress when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Zach standing there, his hat in his hands, his expression troubled. "May I come in?" he asked. Dahlia stepped back, allowing him entry. He glanced at her partially packed carpetbag on the bed and winced. "So you've decided," he said quietly. "Yes, you were right. Mr. Thornton's offer is a good opportunity." Zach nodded, his jaw tight. "I came to apologize. I was abrupt earlier. The truth is, I've gotten used to having you here, Dahlia. The place feels different with you in it. Better." "Thank you for saying so," she replied, her resolve wavering at the sincerity in his voice. "But," he continued, "I meant what I said about you deserving better than being a housekeeper on a cattle ranch. You're educated, refined. You should be in town where there's society, where you might meet someone worthy of you." "Perhaps I don't want society," Dahlia said, finding her courage. "Perhaps I've already met someone I consider worthy." Zach's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "Dahlia, you don't have to say anything," she interrupted, her cheeks burning. "I understand if you don't feel the same. After what happened with your wife, it's natural that you'd be cautious." "It's not that," he said, taking a step toward her. "Well, not entirely. Yes, losing Jenny nearly broke me, but that's not what's holding me back now." "Then what is it?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the gesture. "You came here to marry another man. You ended up working for me by circumstance, not choice. How can I be sure that any feelings you might have aren't just gratitude or confusion?" "Is that what you think?" Dahlia asked, indignation rising. "That I'm so simple-minded I can't distinguish between gratitude and deeper feelings?" "No, that's not. Because I assure you, Zachariah Jones, I know my own mind. Yes, I came here to marry Edmund Cormier, a man I knew only through letters. But in the weeks I've been here, I've come to know you not just through words on paper, but through your actions, your kindness, the way you treat your men, even how you care for your animals. And what I feel isn't gratitude. It's something much more significant." Zach stared at her, and she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. "What are you saying, Dahlia?" "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you," she admitted, her heart pounding. "And if you don't feel the same, I'll understand. I'll go to Sweetwater and trouble you no more. But if there's any chance that you might someday return my feelings, I'd rather stay right here." For a moment, he stood perfectly still, and Dahlia feared she had made a terrible mistake. Then, in two strides, he closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to cradle her face with infinite tenderness. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stood on that empty platform," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "I told myself it was too soon, that you needed time, that I had no right to ask anything of you. But the thought of you leaving— Dahlia, I don't want you to go." "Then ask me to stay," she whispered. "Stay," he said simply. "Not as my housekeeper. Stay because, against all odds, you were meant for me after all." And then he kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as Dahlia responded with all the emotion she had been holding back. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and she felt as though she had finally found her place in the world, not in Boston, not in some imagined future with Edmund Cormier, but here in the arms of this strong, quiet man who had captured her heart. When they finally parted, both breathless, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I should have said something sooner." We both should have, Dahlia agreed, but we have time now. We do, he said, a smile spreading across his face. All the time in the world. News of their courtship spread quickly through Humboldt and beyond, though few expressed surprise. Sarah Miller visited again, this time bringing her husband Jacob, who clapped Zach on the shoulder with obvious approval. The Matthews brothers teased their boss good-naturedly about his improved mood and the sudden appearance of flowers on the dinner table. Howard Thornton received a polite letter declining his offer, and life at the Double J settled into a new rhythm. Dahlia remained in her cabin, propriety still observed despite their acknowledged feelings, but she and Zach spent every evening together, learning each other's stories, hopes, and dreams. Summer bloomed across the Montana prairie, painting the land in vibrant greens and golds. Dahlia's garden flourished under her attentive care, providing fresh vegetables for their table. She learned to ride, with Zach as her patient teacher, and soon was accompanying him on short rides around the property, delighting in the freedom and the spectacular views from the surrounding hills. On a warm August evening, Zach took her to his favorite spot, a high bluff overlooking the valley where the Double J sprawled below them. They spread a blanket on the grass and watched as the sun began its descent, turning the sky into a canvas of orange and pink. "I used to come here when I first lost Jenny," Zach said, his voice quiet but steady. "It helped somehow, seeing everything laid out below, remembering that life goes on." Dahlia squeezed his hand. "Thank you for sharing this with me." "I want to share everything with you, Dahlia." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Dahlia's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Zach, nothing would make me happier." He kissed her then, sealing their promise as the sun sank below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Humboldt, with Sarah and Jacob Miller standing up for them. Dahlia wore her best dress, the pale blue one she had saved for her arrival, with wildflowers in her hair. Zach, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in a new shirt and string tie, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the short aisle toward him. The ceremony was simple, the gathering small, but Dahlia couldn't imagine a more perfect day. Afterward, everyone returned to the Double J for a celebration that lasted well into the night, with music provided by Lee Matthews on his fiddle and dancing on the hard, packed earth of the yard. As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, Zach pulled his new wife away from the festivities, leading her toward the main house. "I have something to show you," he said, guiding her up the stairs to a room she hadn't entered before. It was the master bedroom, freshly painted and furnished with a beautiful 4-poster bed, a dressing table, and a rocking chair by the window. New curtains hung at the windows, and a colorful quilt adorned the bed. "Zach, it's beautiful," Dahlia breathed, turning in a circle to take it all in. "Sarah helped," he admitted. "I wanted it to be perfect for you, for us." Dahlia moved to the dressing table, running her fingers over the polished wood. "Is this new?" "No, it was my mother's. It's been in the attic for years. I had Jacob help me bring it down and restore it." He came to stand behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "This is your home now, Dahlia, our home." She turned in his arms, her heart so full of love it seemed impossible to contain it. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered. "When I stepped off that train to an empty platform, I thought my life was over before it had truly begun. But it was just beginning in a way I couldn't have imagined." "We were both lost," Zach said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And somehow, against all odds, we found each other." As their guests continued celebrating below, Zach and Dahlia began their new life together. two souls who had journeyed through loss and loneliness to find love in the vast, beautiful wilderness of Montana. Autumn came to the Double J, painting the surrounding hills in shades of gold and russet. Dahlia embraced her new role as Zach's wife and partner with enthusiasm, learning the rhythms of ranch life and adding her own touches to their shared home. The sitting room now boasted comfortable cushions, colorful throws, and even a small collection of books ordered from a catalog. The kitchen garden had been expanded, with plans for an even larger one the following spring. Zach watched his wife's transformation from city girl to capable ranch woman with pride and amazement. She had taken to riding as naturally as breathing, accompanying him on his rounds whenever possible. She'd even learned to handle a rifle, though her aim still needed work, a necessary skill in a country where wolves and mountain lions sometimes threatened the livestock. Their evenings were spent together by the fire, talking, reading, or simply enjoying each other's presence. The nightmares that had plagued Zach since Jenny's death had gradually subsided, replaced by peaceful sleep with Dahlia in his arms. One crisp October morning, as they sat at breakfast, Ellie Matthews rode into the yard at a gallop, unusual for the typically unhurried cowboy. Zach was on his feet immediately, meeting him at the door. "Rustlers," Ellie said without preamble. "They hit the Morton place last night, took 20 head and shot Ben Morton when he tried to stop them." "Is he alive?" Zach demanded. "Barely. Doc's with him now, but it doesn't look good." "Jacob sent me to warn you. He thinks they might be working their way through the valley." Dahlia had joined them, her face pale but composed. "What can we do?" "We need to move the herd closer to the house," Zach said, his mind racing. "And set up watches. Illy, ride back and get Tom. I want at least 2 men on guard at all times." "What about the sheriff?" Dahlia asked. "Humboldt's too small for its own lawmen," Zach explained. "The county sheriff's in Sweetwater and he's got too much territory to cover. By the time he gets here, the rustlers could be long gone." "I'll come with you," she said, already reaching for her coat. "No," Zach said firmly. "I need you to stay here. Load the rifle and keep it by the door. If anyone comes that isn't me or one of our men, don't hesitate." Dahlia wanted to argue but recognized the gravity in her husband's expression. "Be careful," she said instead, reaching up to kiss him. "Come back to me." "Always," he promised. The next 3 days were tense, with Zach and his men taking turns patrolling the property boundaries. Dahlia kept the house ready, food prepared, coffee hot, and the rifle loaded as instructed. She slept little, listening for any unusual sounds in the night. On the 4th night, she was awakened by Ranger's frantic barking. Grabbing her robe, she hurried downstairs to find the dog at the window, growling at something in the darkness. Dahlia picked up the rifle, her heart pounding as she tried to peer through the glass. Shadows moved near the barn, men on horseback, at least 3 of them. Zach and the others were patrolling the far boundary. These weren't her husband's men. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door just enough to fire a warning shot into the air. The effect was immediate. The men scattered, but instead of fleeing, 2 headed for the house while another rode toward the corral where Zach kept his best horses. Dahlia slammed and bolted the door, her mind racing. The rifle was loaded with 5 rounds. She had never shot at a person before. Glass shattered as someone broke a window at the back of the house. Dahlia positioned herself at the bottom of the stairs, rifle raised. When a man appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, she fired without hesitation. He yelled and stumbled back, clutching his arm. "She shot me," he shouted to his companions. "The bitch shot me." "Get out of here," Dahlia called, her voice stronger than she felt. "My husband and his men will be back any minute, lying whore," came the reply. "We watched them ride out. Now put down that gun before you get hurt." A second man appeared, and Dahlia fired again, missing but causing him to duck back into the kitchen. She heard them conferring in low voices, then the sound of breaking dishes as they ransacked the room. Rangers' barking suddenly increased, and Dahlia heard the thunder of approaching horses. Relief washed over her. Zach had heard the shots. The rustlers heard it too. They rushed from the kitchen toward the front door, intent on escape. Dahlia fired again as they passed, grazing one man's leg. He cursed but kept moving. Moments later, Zach burst through the door, his face a mask of fury and fear. "Dahlia!" he shouted. "Here," she called, lowering the rifle with shaking hands. "I'm all right." He crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering her into his arms. "When I heard the shots." He couldn't finish the thought, just held her tighter. "There were 3 of them," she explained, her voice muffled against his chest. "I think I hit 2, but they got away. Jacob and the boys are after them," Zach said. "Are you sure you're not hurt?" "I'm fine," she assured him, though now that the danger had passed, she found herself trembling uncontrollably. "Just frightened." Zach led her to a chair, kneeling before her. "You were so brave," he said, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and lingering fear. "When I realized they were coming here instead of after the cattle, Dahlia, I've never ridden so fast in my life." She managed a shaky smile. "I remembered what you taught me about the rifle." "You remembered better than I hoped," he said with a strained laugh. "Jacob said there was a blood trail leading from the house." The Matthews brothers returned at dawn, weary but triumphant. They had caught up with the rustlers about 5 miles away, where one man's injuries had slowed their escape. The county sheriff, summoned by a passing traveler who had heard the commotion, had arrived to take the criminals into custody. "Turns out they are the same gang that hit 3 other ranches," Lee reported. "They've been working their way north from Wyoming. Ben Morton wasn't their first victim, but thanks to Miss Dahlia here, he might be their last." Dahlia blushed at the praise. "I just did what anyone would do to protect their home." "Not anyone," Zach said, his arm around her shoulders. "Most city women would have fainted at the first sign of trouble." "I'm not a city woman anymore," she reminded him. "I'm a rancher's wife. The bravest, most beautiful rancher's wife in all of Montana Territory," Zach declared, kissing her forehead. News of Dahlia's courage spread throughout the valley, cementing her place in the community. No longer was she seen as just the mail-order bride who had arrived for one man and married another, but as a woman of strength and determination who had earned her place on the frontier. Winter descended on Montana with a ferocity that Dahlia, despite Zach's warnings, had not fully anticipated. Snow blanketed the land, transforming the familiar landscape into a glittering white wilderness. The temperature dropped so low that the air itself seemed to freeze, making each breath painful. Life on the ranch slowed but did not stop. The cattle required constant attention to ensure they had access to feed and unfrozen water. The horses were brought into the barn, their breath creating clouds of steam in the frigid air. Inside the house, Dahlia kept the fires burning and the rooms as warm as possible. She had prepared for the long winter by canning vegetables from her garden, smoking meat, and stocking the root cellar with potatoes, carrots, and apples. The pantry was filled with flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples that would see them through until spring. On the coldest days, when venturing outside was dangerous, she and Zach would sit by the fire in the evenings, reading aloud to each other or planning improvements for the ranch in the coming year. These quiet moments, with snowflakes tapping against the windows and the wind howling down the chimney, became some of Dahlia's most treasured memories. It was during one such evening, as January turned to February, that Dahlia decided to share her news. She had suspected for several weeks, but had wanted to be certain before telling Zach. "I have something to tell you," she said, setting aside her mending. Zach looked up from the ledger he was reviewing. "What is it?" "I believe we'll be welcoming a new member to the Double J come summer," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. For a moment, Zach stared at her uncomprehendingly. Then understanding dawned, his face transforming with a joy so pure it brought tears to Dahlia's eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby," she nodded, her own happiness bubbling over. "I think so. I've missed my courses for 2 months now, and I've been feeling differently. Tired in the mornings, certain foods don't agree with me." Zach was on his knees before her in an instant, his hands gentle on her waist. "A baby," he repeated, awe in his voice. Then a shadow crossed his face. "Dahlia, I know what you're thinking," she said softly, cupping his cheek. "You're remembering Jenny." "But I'm not Jenny, and this is a different time. I'm strong and healthy and will have proper help when the time comes." "I couldn't bear to lose you," he admitted, the fear naked in his eyes. "You won't," she promised. "This child and I are going to be fine. You'll see." Despite his initial fears, Zach embraced the coming change with characteristic determination. As winter grudgingly gave way to spring, he expanded their bedroom to create a nursery and ordered a cradle from a craftsman in Sweetwater. He insisted Dahlia rest more and hired a local girl, Mary Fitzpatrick, to help with the heavier household chores. Dahlia's pregnancy progressed without complications, her body changing as the new life within her grew. By June, her condition was unmistakable, her dresses let out to accommodate her expanding middle. Zach hovered protectively, insisting she stop riding and limiting her garden work to the coolest hours of the morning. "You're going to smother me with all this fussing," she complained one evening as he arranged pillows behind her back. "Just taking care of what's most precious to me," he replied, unrepentant. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him, though secretly she was touched by his concern. Sarah Miller became a frequent visitor, bringing advice and reassurance based on her experience helping other women through childbirth. "You're doing beautifully," she told Dahlia during one such visit. "Everything is progressing exactly as it should." "Try telling Zach that," Dahlia said with a fond smile. "He acts as though I might shatter at any moment." "Men," Sarah said, rolling her eyes. "Jacob was the same with his sister when she was expecting. It's their way of dealing with something they can't control." As Dahlia's time drew near, Zach arranged for the doctor from Sweetwater to stay in Humboldt, ready to ride to the Double J at a moment's notice. He also asked Sarah to move into the ranch's guest room for the final week, a suggestion Dahlia gratefully accepted. The baby arrived on a stormy night in late August, announcing its imminent arrival as thunder shook the windows. Zach scentily galloping through the darkness for the doctor, while Sarah calmly prepared the bedroom for the birth. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the following day. Zach paced the hallway, flinching at every cry from behind the closed door, praying with an intensity he hadn't felt since his parents' deaths. When Sarah finally emerged to tell him he could enter, he was almost afraid to hope. Inside, he found Dahlia pale and exhausted but smiling, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Zach," she said softly, "come meet your son." With trembling hands, he took the infant, marveling at the tiny face, the perfect fingers, the wisp of dark hair that promised to be as wavy as his own. "He's beautiful," Zach whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Just like his mother. What shall we call him?" Dahlia asked, watching the love bloom on her husband's face. "Benjamin," Zach decided after a moment. "Benjamin Edmund Jones. For Ben Morton and Edmund Cormier," Dahlia nodded, understanding. "Two good men who, in different ways, brought us together." "Is that all right?" "It's perfect," she assured him. Benjamin thrived, growing stronger each day. He had his father's blue eyes and dark hair, but his mother's delicate features and determined spirit. Dahlia recovered quickly from the birth, soon resuming her duties around the ranch, though now with a baby strapped to her chest or napping nearby. The first snow of winter fell when Benjamin was 3 months old, dusting the Double J in white and heralding the beginning of another Montana winter. As the family gathered before the fire on Christmas Eve, Dahlia nursing the baby, Zach watching them with undisguised adoration, Ranger curled at their feet, Dahlia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. "What are you thinking about?" Zach asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About that day at Humboldt Station," she replied. "Standing alone on that empty platform, certain I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And instead," he prompted, moving to sit beside her, "instead I found everything I never knew I wanted." She leaned against him, Benjamin nestled between them. "Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we never thought to ask for. Like a stubborn Boston lady who turned my world upside down," Zach teased. "Exactly like that," Dahlia agreed with a smile. "And like a Montana rancher who looked at a stranded mail-order bride and said, 'You were meant for me.'" Zach kissed her then, gentle and reverent, as outside the window snow continued to fall, blanketing their ranch, their home, in pristine white. "I meant those words," he murmured against her lips. "From the first moment, somehow I knew." "I know," Dahlia whispered. "And you were right." Spring returned to the Double J, bringing with it Benjamin's first birthday and news that would further change the Jones family. Dahlia was expecting their second child. This time, the announcement was met with pure joy, the shadows of the past dimmed by the happiness of the present. As the years passed, the Double J prospered under their care. The herd grew, the gardens expanded, and the house rang with children's laughter. Benjamin was joined by a sister, Elizabeth Sarah, and later by another brother, William Jacob. Dahlia's days were full, but she never regretted the path that had led her to this life. Humboldt grew as well, evolving from a mere whistle-stop to a proper small town with a school, a church, and eventually its own sheriff. Zach and Dahlia were respected members of the community, their story becoming part of local lore, the mail-order bride who arrived for one man but was destined for another. On their 10th anniversary, Zach surprised Dahlia with a trip to Boston, her first return since leaving as a young woman with nothing but hopes and a carpetbag. The city had changed, becoming even more crowded and industrial than she remembered. Standing on the busy street outside the textile mill where she had once worked, Dahlia felt a profound gratitude for the twist of fate that had led her west. "You ever miss it?" Zach asked as they walked along the harbor, Benjamin, Elizabeth, and William running ahead under the watchful eye of Sarah Miller, who had accompanied them to help with the children. "Miss what?" "The noise, the dirt, the feeling of being just one more anonymous soul in a sea of humanity." Dahlia shook her head. "No, I don't miss it. I miss what might have been if my parents had lived, if circumstances had been different. But this life, our life, is everything I could have wanted and more. Even with all the hardships," he pressed. "The winters, the isolation, the rustlers." "Especially with those things," she said firmly. "They've shown me my own strength, Zach. In Boston, I was surviving. In Montana, with you, I'm truly living." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening, lines earned from squinting in the sun, from laughing with their children, from a life fully embraced. "When I rode up to that platform and saw you standing there so proper in your city clothes, looking so lost, I had no idea how completely you would change my life." "Nor I yours," she replied, slipping her hand into his. but I'm grateful every day for whatever twist of fate brought us together. Fate, luck, or divine intervention, Zach said, squeezing her hand. All I know is you were meant to be mine, Dahlia Gibson Jones, and I was meant to be yours. Always, she agreed, leaning against his shoulder as they watched their children play, the future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Montana sky. In the years that followed, the Double J continued to thrive. Benjamin grew into a young man with his father's love for the land and his mother's thoughtful nature. At 18, he began taking on more responsibility for the ranch operations, showing a natural talent for the business side that impressed even Jacob Miller, who had retired but still advised them occasionally. Elizabeth, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination, developed a passion for teaching. After completing her education in Sweetwater, she returned to Humboldt to take a position at the local school, bringing new ideas and enthusiasm to the small community. William, the youngest, inherited his father's way with horses and eventually established a breeding program at the Double J that became known throughout the territory for producing some of the finest stock in Montana. Dahlia and Zach watched their children grow with pride, their own love deepening with each passing year. Their home remained the heart of the ranch, warm and welcoming to family, friends, and travelers alike. The gardens that Dahlia had started on that first summer had expanded into productive plots that supplied not only their family, but often their neighbors as well. On a golden autumn day, as they celebrated their 25th anniversary with a gathering that included nearly everyone from Humboldt and many from beyond, Zach pulled Dahlia away from the festivities for a moment of privacy. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to the spot where he had proposed all those years ago, the bluff overlooking the valley where their life together had unfolded. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Inside was a ring more elaborate than the simple gold band he had given her on their wedding day, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, catching the late afternoon sunlight. "Zach, it's beautiful," Dahlia breathed as he slipped it onto her finger beside her wedding ring. "Not half as beautiful as you," he replied, his voice still holding the power to make her heart skip after all these years. 25 years ago, you took a chance on a lonely rancher who could barely boil water without burning it. The best chance I ever took," she said, smiling up at him. "There were times I feared I couldn't make you happy here, so far from the life you knew," he admitted. "Days when the winters seemed too harsh, the work too hard, the isolation too complete. And yet here we are," Dahlia said, gesturing to the valley below where their family and friends continued celebrating. "I wouldn't change a single day. Not even that first day at the station, the disappointment of finding your intended gone and a dusty cowboy in his place. Especially not that day," she said firmly. "That was the day my real life began." Zach pulled her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been when she was a young bride. "Do you remember what I said to you that day?" Dahlia smiled against his chest. "You said I was meant for you." "The truest words I ever spoke," he murmured into her hair, still dark despite threads of silver. "You were meant for me, Dahlia, and I for you. Whatever forces brought us together, I thank God for them every day." As the sun began to set over the land they had tamed and cherished together, casting long shadows across the buildings and fields of the Double J, Dahlia and Zach stood wrapped in each other's arms, their love as vast and enduring as the Montana sky above them. The story that began on an empty platform with a chance meeting and 7 simple words, "You were meant for me," had grown into a lifetime of joy, hardship, laughter, and love. It was a story still being written with each passing day, each new challenge faced together, each quiet moment shared. It was, Dahlia thought as Zach led her back to their waiting family, the most beautiful story she could have imagined and entirely their own.